What's up, everybody? It's Caleb from the Plastic Underground, back in the shop this week. Last week I made the shield from Captain America's shield from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and he had it in Endgame, I think Infinity War 2. And so I realized that if I want to make a wall in the theater room with Marvel props, that I have to have at least the base three main characters. So Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor. So this week I make Thor's hammer.
Alright, you guys, so to start off, I am cutting out these rectangles. On the blueprint, they are marked. I have them separate for the top, bottom, and the sides. The only reason I did that is because the sides have a design on them and the top has the center mark for the handle. So cut those all out, and now I am cutting out the triangle piece. This will be the corner pieces for the hammer part. I'm going through and I'm getting an idea of how I want it to be, realizing here that I need the top and bottom pieces to have a 45-degree cut. So that's all marked on the blueprint. I just, when I'm building stuff, I'm doing it from scrap, and then I mark the blueprint specifically to show you guys exactly how I did it. So I cut those out and I glue those on to the top piece here, and then the side piece gets glued onto the other side of that. So you can see how that little strip there gives it that nice bevel shape on the corners like that. This is the easiest part of this build so far. Took a little bit to figure this one out because of all of the angles. I've seen a lot of people, they just glue a couple of those yoga blocks together, and then they run it through the bandsaw and do all their angle cuts. It's a super easy way to do it, super efficient. I do not have a bandsaw, so I had to go through and try to figure out all of these shapes and corners and all that fun stuff. So now I am putting on the, I guess I would call these the side plates for the hammer face. These are 45-degree cuts on the back, nothing on the front. You will have to go through like I did and make a couple changes. Glue them on first is the easiest way to do it, and then you will see where it overhangs. So basically what I did is I made sure that I kept it symmetrical, so the top plate and the bottom plate are the ones that I cut the angle on, just to keep it consistent. So those corners get sliced. You can see how that matches now. So those corners get sliced off as needed for the top and the bottom. And this is the front plate again. This is my base cut, and now I am figuring out the exact dimension that I need. This has been changed and altered on the blueprint for you guys. This plate has a little bit more of a 45-degree cut. It kind of squishes and will take the shape with a little bit of pressure. Anyway, So I just slowly go through, make sure the corners line up, and then I push the sides down. And you can see how that's already taken shape. These are the same size as those corner pieces that we cut out earlier. I just cut another strip of these out, and this is one of those things where you are never going to get the shape, cut, and fit right the first time. So all I did is I just made sure it was the same width as the other one, and I cut the 45 bevel on both sides, and I just glued them into place with contact cement, and I went back through and I cut them flush to both sides. And then just go through with your Dremel and you just smooth them out, and that's pretty much it. It's the easiest way to do it. And then while I'm flattening out those corners, I'm also going through and I'm sanding all the seams, just make sure there's no high parts, low parts, and getting rid of some of that over glue. So now I'm doing the detail pieces on the bottom of the hammer. You can see I have the side mark there. That's important because these detail pieces on the bottom line up with the detail line on the side. It is to the left of where the horizontal line starts to go up. So I finished the one side of the hammer, and now I go through and I do all this stuff that I need to do on the inside so that I can obviously reach it and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just using a couple pieces of scrap foam here, and I am just gluing that onto the inside of the hammer to fill in these detail cut lines here. So now for the side pieces, these all are lower. This is a very time-consuming part. I just made sure that my cuts didn't go too far, and I just went really slow with this. So you cut the shape out, push it down into the hammer, put your glue on, then use your hand and go in there and lift it up a little bit. I think these are recessed like 3 to 4 millimeters. They're not perfect. It just wanted to make it so it looks like they're recessed. They're not all exactly the same, but it just looks a lot better. So now the other side, I do the same thing, but before I put the hammer plate on, I go through and I put those recessed panel lines in, just because you can get your hand in there and it's a lot easier. So now I marked where my pipe goes. It's a 1-inch PVC pipe. I have those center marks on the templates for you guys, and then I just made sure I lined up the pipe to that center line and then just drew the circle so I knew I could cut out exactly. You also can put the pipe over your center line and just give it a little twist, and you will see the line, the pressure line left over. So that's another way to mark it too. You can also sand your pipe and use it and actually have it like a hole saw too. So now I'm test fitting the handle in, using a coffee lid to mark my top circle. And now I'm using my circle cutting technique, which is I hold the blade steady, up and down, and then I use my other hand to turn the foam. I find that's the easiest way for me to get a pretty clean circle. And I'm just putting it on there, making sure it's the size I want. Now I'm using some 2mm craft foam here, and I am wrapping it around my handle. I put the handle in the hammer, and I marked where the bottom of it is, so I know exactly where I need to put the wrap. I use contact cement on the pipe and the foam, wrap it around, then I cut off the excess. And then you pull that off. You'd be a lot more careful than I was. I did it pretty quick, and I didn't get the cut exactly right, but it's on the back side of the hammer, and I knew that would be the side facing the wall, so I wasn't too worried about it. Then you use your rotary tool and you just go over that seam line after you cut it. So now at the top of the handle where it meets the hammer, there are a couple detail, I guess you'd call them, they're like circles. I don't know exactly what they are. They're like a little stop, like handle stop. So I use some 2mm foam for the big one, then I use some 4mm for the top one. And I'm just using super glue for these, not contact cement, just because they're small. And spread that glue around, glue them on. So now these are the rings, the handle rings. I pre-marked where I wanted these to go, just so it's a lot easier when you put the glue on, so you know exactly where to put the glue. It makes it a lot easier, and you obviously get the peaks to line up a lot better doing it that way than guessing every time. Now in the movie used prop, there are 9 of these all the way to the bottom, but mine has 8 because I think I spaced them out a little too far. I kind of like the way it looks spaced out a little further, but there are 9 officially. But like I said, I used 8. So now the pommel goes on the bottom. I pre-marked where I wanted this pommel to go, and I cut the bottom ring so that it would sit flush. You can see how that ring is cut. I cut those so that this pommel would sit flush against the handle. I added a couple pieces of foam on my pommel to extend it around. I made my blueprints, my patterns for this. I based it off the handle. I forgot that I was going to do a 2mm wrap, so obviously that adds a little bit more circumference. So I had to go through and add a little bit more for this piece. But that's all been taken care of on the blueprint for you guys, so you don't have to worry about it. So I glue that on, cut off the excess. I always like to leave a lot of excess. It's a lot easier to cut it off and try to get it to match perfectly. Using a piece of 5mm foam here to put on the bottom, and I'm just slicing that off. This does not matter to cut perfect because it gets a bevel all the way around the edge. You can see I marked the side and the bottom where I wanted the bevel to be. Cut most of it off so it doesn't turn into dust. Then I go through with my rotary tool and turn the rest into dust. So you can see that little shape there, gives it a nice little detail. Use some really thin 2mm strips of foam here for the detail around the pommel. This just goes around the top. Now I'm trying something new here, and this ended up working out pretty good. This is some puffy paint. It's mostly used for like t-shirts and that kind of stuff. You squeeze it on, and the paint stays raised. It doesn't like dry and flatten out. It stays raised. That's why it's called puffy paint. So I wanted to use this for all of the knots and scroll work. This, I knew this was going to be the most time-consuming part of this build, but again, without this, it does not look like Thor's hammer. there's a very crucial part of this hammer, is the Nordic knot work and all these lines. This really helps sell the three-dimensional aspect of it. Again, this is another part here that's really noticeable for Thor's hammer. I used my pen and I drew out all of these runes, and I cut them with my X-Acto knife. Did the same with this side piece. I cut it with my X-Acto knife. Then I'm using the heat gun to go through and heat form these cut lines so they open up. And these runes turned out really good. I really like the way that they look. It just helps sell that like etched rune look. So now the hammer itself is done, and I am ready to glue the handle in. Use a little bit of super glue on the top. Then I use a little bit on the bottom. And make sure that that is where you want it when you put it up there, because that is where it is going to stay. And then the top circle detail gets glued on the top too. I've seen people make a frame that goes inside of the hammer to hold the handle in place. But since the circle piece goes on top, I figured why not use the top and the bottom of the hammer itself to hold the PVC pipe in it. It actually works out really good. It makes it really sturdy. This is for the bottom of the pommel. It's just a smaller circle cut out and then beveled with the rotary tool at an angle. Alright, so now I am using some Plasti Dip to seal this. I used 3 layers of Plasti Dip. And now I'm just using some of this silver metallic from Rust-Oleum. It turned out pretty good. Now is the tedious part of painting. I am going through and I am painting the leather handle part, all the leather wrap handle underneath. You can see from that first coat here that it's going to need a few more coats. I think I ended up putting 4 coats of this paint on, and it took a pretty long time to do, especially because I don't know. It's one of those things where you either paint the handle brown and go through by hand and paint all the silver, or you just paint the brown, and I decided to paint the brown. So now for the strap, I'm using a 2mm piece of foam, using my iron and tin foil technique to get a leather effect. Now I'm going through and I'm weathering all the silver and the handle with some brown and black watered down paint mixed up. Going through, putting that on everything. You can see how once you add this to the corner detail pieces there, how much more you can see that the knot texture in there. And I go through with a little bit of thicker paint, less water, just to make sure it gets in the cracks and all the low spots, and that it's a little darker. You can see it a lot better. So now I glue the strap in. Obviously that strap was painted with the same color leather paint that I used for the handle. And then I go through and I put some of that same weathered paint mixture on that too, just to kind of tie it all together. You won't be able to hold it by the strap and swing it around, but this is a wall prop for me, so I'm not going to be doing that anyway. If you want to do that, I would use a piece of real leather and maybe drill all the way through the PVC pipe and install it that way. So, for Thor's hammer, that is it. It is ready for the wall. And now I am ready for a finished prop coffee break. I always drink a lot of coffee when I am doing props and making stuff, but there is nothing better than having a cup of coffee when you are all finished with your project and you can just sit back, sip your coffee, and be glad the prop is done, and then try not to think about that you have to edit hours and hours of footage, but I do it because I love doing it, and I hope you guys get a kick out of some of the stuff I make. And if you like it, let me know. Comment below if you want to see anything specific, and I'm going to continue on some of my Marvel stuff, so I will catch you guys next week.